The morning light barely pierced through the thick clouds hanging over the ruined city, casting a dim, eerie glow across the desolate streets. Mason and Riley hadn't slept much. The fire escape they'd climbed up to escape the walkers last night provided a safe enough perch, but the constant sounds echoing through the city, distant groans, shuffling feet, and occasional screams, kept them on edge. Every shadow felt like a threat, and every creak in the rusted metal beneath them reminded them just how precarious survival had become. Mason glanced over at Riley, who sat huddled next to him, her face pale and eyes wide with exhaustion. She hadn't said much, but her silence spoke volumes. He could tell she was scared, just like he was, though they both tried to hide it. After all, in a world gone dark, showing weakness felt like an invitation for something, human or otherwise, to exploit it. "Ready to go?" Mason whispered, reaching out to gently nudge her shoulder. Riley looked up at him, her expression hardening as she nodded. "Yeah, ready as I'll ever be." She adjusted the straps of her worn backpack and took a deep breath, steadying herself. The plan was simple: keep moving south, stay off main roads, and avoid any groups they came across. They couldn't trust anyone. Not anymore. Food was running low, and water was scarce. But the promise of safer communities down south, rumors they'd heard from other survivors, was enough to keep them pushing forward. They climbed down from the fire escape, trying to make as little noise as possible. The streets were empty, for now, but the eerie quiet only made them more tense. They moved swiftly, sticking to the shadows and slipping through alleyways, hoping to avoid any stray walkers or hostile humans. Every step was calculated, every sound scrutinized. The further south they went, the more signs of violence they encountered. Burned-out cars lined the streets, some still carrying the remains of their unfortunate passengers. Buildings were either gutted or barricaded, windows shattered, doors kicked in. The faint smell of decay hung in the air, a constant reminder of the world they now lived in. What do you think it'll be like down there?" Riley whispered as they paused behind an overturned bus to catch their breath. Her voice was quiet, as if speaking too loudly might attract something unwanted. Mason glanced at her, shrugging slightly. "Honestly, I don't know. I just hope it's better than here. Less chaos. People working together instead of tearing each other apart." He hesitated before adding, "But it won't be paradise. People will still be people. They'll still do whatever it takes to survive." Riley nodded thoughtfully. "Yeah, I guess so." She looked down at her feet, kicking at a piece of rubble. I just want things to feel normal again, you know? Like they used to be." Mason understood. He wanted that, too. But deep down, he knew that normal was gone. Maybe forever. The world had changed too much, and the people who had managed to survive had been forced to change along with it. It wasn't a matter of going back to the way things were, it was about finding a way to live in the world as it was now. As they continued down the street, the sound of a distant scream shattered the silence, freezing them both in place. Mason motioned for Riley to stay quiet, pressing his finger to his lips as they crouched down behind a crumbling wall. The scream was faint, but it carried a raw, desperate terror that sent chills down Mason's spine. It was coming from somewhere nearby, echoing off the buildings. They exchanged a glance. They both knew what the scream meant: someone was in trouble. But helping them could mean risking their own lives. Riley looked up at Mason, her expression conflicted. Should we go check it out?" Mason's jaw tightened. Every instinct screamed at him to keep moving, to ignore the plea for help echoing through the empty streets. But he also knew that if it were them out there, they'd hope someone would at least try to help. "Let's get closer," he whispered. "But be careful. We don't know what we're walking into." They moved slowly, sticking to the shadows as they approached the source of the scream. As they rounded a corner, they saw the scene unfold before them. A lone figure, another survivor, by the looks of it, was pinned against a wall by two walkers. The man struggled, his eyes wide with panic as he fought to keep the undead at bay. Mason acted on instinct, pulling a crowbar from his pack. "Stay here," he whispered to Riley, then crept forward, his steps silent. He swung the crowbar, smashing it into the side of the first walker's skull with a sickening crunch. The second walker turned, groaning as it reached out, but Mason quickly struck again, bringing it down with a single, brutal swing. The man gasped, his breaths coming in short, frantic bursts as he slumped against the wall, staring up at Mason with a mixture of fear and relief. He was young, maybe in his 20s, with dark hair and a haunted look in his eyes. Thank you," he stammered, his voice shaky. "I thought I was done for." Mason nodded, glancing around to make sure there were no other threats. "You should be more careful. This city isn't safe." The man nodded, swallowing hard. "Yeah, I know. I got separated from my group. We were heading south, like everyone else. Heard there was a safe community in Florida." "Same direction we're going," Riley said, stepping out from her hiding spot and joining them. The man's eyes flickered with a faint glimmer of hope. Maybe we could travel together? At least for a while?" Mason hesitated. Trust was a luxury he could barely afford. Every new person meant another potential threat. But traveling in a group also meant an extra set of hands, an extra pair of eyes to watch their backs. Riley glanced at him, her expression pleading. "Mason, he's alone. And he's just trying to survive, like us." After a tense moment, Mason sighed. "Fine. You can come with us, for now. But if you pull anything—" "I won't," the man said quickly, shaking his head. "I swear. Name's Ben, by the way." Mason gave a curt nod, introducing himself and Riley. The three of them continued south, moving carefully as they navigated the broken streets. As the day wore on, Mason found himself glancing over at Ben, watching for any signs of deception. But so far, Ben seemed genuine, just another survivor trying to make it in a world that had gone mad. They kept moving, pausing only to scavenge what little they could find. A couple of canned goods from a ransacked convenience store, a half-empty bottle of water that someone had left behind. It wasn't much, but it would keep them going, at least for a while. As dusk began to fall, they found a small, abandoned building that seemed relatively safe. They barricaded the doors and windows as best as they could, settling in for another long, uneasy night. Riley and Ben sat by the window, keeping watch as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the city in a deep, haunting twilight. Mason lay down nearby, his mind racing with thoughts of what lay ahead. They still had a long way to go, and he knew the journey south would only get more dangerous as they moved further from the city. But for now, they had each other. And in a world where trust was scarce and danger lurked around every corner, that was something worth holding on to.